All right, guys, how's it going? So today I'm going to be doing a quick little, today's going to be a talk episode. I'm going to do a quick little tutorial on how to pick out a rod. So this is just going to be general suggestions. This isn't going to be anything that's going to go into great extreme detail as far as picking out line, reel, all that kind of stuff. This could be just a general guideline for you guys when you go out to the stores and are looking for something to get. So there are 4 questions, in my opinion, that you guys should ask yourselves. And if you guys have worked with me before, I usually ask you guys these questions when I'm helping you guys pick out rods. So the first question I almost always ask you guys is, what are you fishing for? So if you're fishing for bass, you're obviously going to need different gear than if you were fishing for salmon or steelhead. There's not really a one and done, all-inclusive rod out there that's going to be able to do all that stuff and do it well for you. So that's kind of the first question you should ask yourself. What are you fishing for? And the second question you should ask yourself is what lures and techniques you're going to be using. So for crankbaits and stuff like that, you're going to want a different rod than you would if you were going to do any sort of finesse presentation. And I'll have a breakdown of those 2 techniques later in the video. And then the third question is, how experienced at fishing are you? So if you're relatively new at fishing, you're not going to really notice the difference between a excuse me, a low-end rod and a high-end rod. Now, that's not to say you got to be a snob and you got to buy the high-end stuff all the time, and you're not being cheap if you buy the low-end. You want to buy something that you are going to be able to know the differences. So, for example, if you are brand new at fishing and you buy a $300 or $400 rod, you might be getting bites on that $300 or $400 rod if you're doing something that's light. But at the end of the day, if you don't know what a bite feels like, that rod's going to be of no use to you. So I generally tell people to buy a lower end rod, learn what bites feel like and all that stuff. And then as you learn what a bite feels like, both the hard-hitting bites and the more subtle bites, then you kind of upgrade your equipment proportionally until you don't feel a difference after you have enough experience. And then how often are you going to fish is probably the 4th question I ask. If you are going to go out maybe once or twice a year, there is absolutely no point in you spending $400 or $500 on a rod, or even $100 or $200. If you're just a casual weekend angler, that is not going to do you any good to spend that much money on something that's basically going to be sitting in the corner for all the time. I'll tell you guys to usually get a lower end option, because at the end of the day, you're probably not going to be doing nothing fancy anyway when you're going out once or twice a year. So there's no need to buy something that is made for other sort of techniques and stuff like that. So as far as when you're picking out the rod, there's a lot of writing on said rod. So this is a little bit of an explanation on what's on that rod. So for this picture I popped up, this is my St. Croix Victory. This is what I use for finesse fishing. So at the top you'll see VTS 610 medium light extra fast. So that's nothing really important when you're picking out the rod. That's just the product identification thing. So if you went on St. Croix's website, that would be like the product number kind of ordeal. That's at the very top. Now the thing that's directly under the VTS, you'll see that there's a number and it says power. So the 6 is foot, the 10 is inches. So that's whole rod right there is a 6 foot, 10 inch rod. That's how long the rod is, flat out. Now, it'll say Mead Light Power. So what that Mead Light Power stands for is medium light power. So the power of your rod is basically how much backbone you have to that rod. That the tip has its own separate thing, which is underneath of it. But for the power, that's how much backbone you have on that rod. So it goes generally from ultralight to light to medium light to medium, medium heavy, heavy, double X heavy. There might be some more, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. This is usually where you do the power relative to the species you're fishing for. So, for example, like I said, this rod is a finesse rod. I'm getting bass that are generally anywhere from 3 to 6 pounds on the average. So I go with a medium light. You can get away with a medium fishing those guys too, but I just like something a little bit lighter so I have a little bit less backbone and control over the fish so they feel a little bit bigger. Not to say that a 6 pound smallmouth when it's fighting you doesn't feel big, but it adds just a little bit more sportiness to it, going a little bit under. However, on the flip side of that, if you go too far under, you don't have no control over that fish. And if you're fighting fish that are very fragile and tire easily, if you go in too undergun, you might fight the fish to exhaustion and where it dies. So it's kind of a balancing act on power and stuff like that. And you should proportionally do it towards the fish species you're fishing for in terms of how much backbone you have on your rod. So underneath the length and the power of the rod, you have something called action. So this is an extra fast action. So basically that is going to be the tip of the rod, how easily the tip of the rod bends. So this is extra fast. I believe this is the fastest action rod that is made. So that means that rod tip is going to bend from the third eyelet from the top and up. So that's just going to allow, it's going to be easier for the fish when they go to pull on that. That rod's going to bend super easily, so they're not going to really feel that rod kind of pull back. So they're more inclined to hold on to it longer. If fish get really pressured and stuff like that, if they feel any sort of extra resistance to what they're grabbing, they might actually drop it right away. So the action allows for a little bit increased sensitivity and stuff like that. And like I said, it'll bend before the third eyelet if you were going from top down. From there, it goes down to fast, and I think moderate fast, moderate, and then I think after moderate, going back down, it gets to slow, and then extra slow. And when you get down to the slow and stuff like that, that's generally the action on like float fishing steps and all that good stuff. I'm not going to go into float rods this video. That's on, I have a center pin fishing video where I kind of touch on your bait casting, spinning, and float fishing setups for that, and what all that stuff on the rods and stuff means and what you need for that. I'll link that video down below, so if you want to check that out, you can. But for the purposes of this video, I'm not really touching the float stuff. So the SC3 Plus carbon, so that's just something that's exclusive to St. Croix. That's their, what the rod's made of technology. I don't know off the top of my head what the SC3 Plus carbon is. That's something I'd have to go online and look up. That's not going to be on every rod. But underneath the SC3 carbon, there is a pound rating, so 6 to 20. So this is theoretically the line poundage that this rod is in the happy zone for. So if you go anything lighter than 6 pound, you might have difficulty casting distances. And then if you go anything over 20 pounds, theoretically, the guides on the inside are not made to handle anything that heavy. So theoretically, you could ruin and damage the guides on the rod. I've gone up to 30-pound braid on my rod that was only meant to, I think, go up to like 10 or 12 or something like that. Never had it cut into it or had a problem with it, so I wouldn't go over double what that's rated for, so I would not put 40-pound line on this rod. I would not. I would, in my opinion, I would suggest sticking within that 6 to 20. And it is rated for monofilament line. It's not for braid. So that 6 to 20 is for monofilament line. braid has a different diameter, so just check your braid box. It'll say monofilament equivalent on it and that stuff. That's the range for that. So the next to the pound line, there is some fractions with ounces. So this is the lure weight that this rod can withstand to cast. So if it's in this case, this rod is set for a minimum 1/16 all the way up to 3/8 of an ounce. So if you go anything lighter than 1/16, you're going to have difficulty casting your lure out there. You're going to lose casting ability, basically. So 3/8. So if you go up over that 3/8, theoretically, when you're just kind of holding your lure, if you were just holding it out, the rod tip theoretically could break if you go up and above that 3/8. Now I've gone up a little bit above that in weight. I've never had a problem with the rod tip breaking, but I don't go up above it very much after that. So if you notice some professional tournament anglers and stuff like that, when they flip in fish, or if you've even seen anyone flip fish in on a boat, and if you've seen a rod tip break, more than likely it broke because that rod is not meant to hold a 2 or 3 pound fish. This rod in particular is only meant to go up to 3/8 of an ounce. So if you're bringing in a bass that's 3 or 4 pounds and you're lifting it up by the tip, you're going, I think there's 16 ounces in a pound. So you're going way up and over that maximum rating. So that rod tip is not meant to do that. So that's why you see when people flip fish in boats and stuff like that or on shore, you'll notice a lot of rod tips will break. And this is exactly the reason why. It's because the rod tip and backbone, for that matter, is not meant to have 4 or 5 pounds of weight holding onto it and just dangling it out in free air. So again, how to choose, you're going to go back to those 4 questions I asked you. So what are you fishing for, lure technique, how experienced you are, and how often you fish. And once you get that figured out, then you can pick from there. So as far as some suggestions I talked about finesse tactics with that rod that St. Croix had. I use that for finesse tactics. So what exactly am I looking for if that's something that I want to get into? So as a general rule, I usually tell you guys to do anything from a 6'6" to a 7'3" rod, anywhere from medium light to medium power rod, and again, that's the backbone on the rod. Action, anywhere from a fast to extra fast, so again, that's going to have to do with where the tip bends at. Your setup as a whole should be light in terms of actual weight. So literally, when you pick that up, your rod should not be heavy at all, because then if it's heavy, you don't really pick up on the subtle bites and stuff like that, so it gets kind of difficult. So species that are generally targeted with these techniques are small and largemouth bass, walleye, and steelhead. So this is just stuff that I'm using like around here. You can definitely catch other species of fish on these techniques, but for purposes of what I actually catch on those, that's just kind of what I have listed. And so again, your targeted species are small, largemouth bass, walleye, steelhead. You can get all kinds of things on it. So some examples of what is technically a finesse technique is like a Ned rig, drop shot, racky rig, etc. There's a few others, but that's just the 3 that I've used. So for your hard baits, this is generally what I suggest. You could use a bait caster or a spinning rod for this. I usually say anywhere from 6'6" up to a 7'6", medium power up to heavy. You can go up above that if you're doing musky or anything like that, but that's just the heaviest thing I've ever used. Actions could be fast, so some lures you can use for your hard baits. It's gonna be crankbaits, top waters, so like whopper ploppers, spooks, stuff like that. Crankbaits, so like, oh, I already said crankbaits. So like your DT Rapalas and stuff like that, that would be an example of crankbait. Spoons, so like your run-of-the-mill Daredevils, Cabela's brand spoons, Moonshine, whatever it may be. Inline spinners, so your Blue Fox Vibrexes, Arctic spinners, so on and so forth. Basically anything that's not a soft plastic will fit into the hard baits rods. And then species generally targeted is pretty much everything. You can go after anything with these rods. So just around here, musky pike, salmon, steelhead, bass, etc. All right, rod suggestions for all you beginners out there. Everyone's got to start somewhere, so don't ever feel bad about being a beginner when it comes to being a beginner in anything. So, general guidelines, you don't need nothing fancy here. A rod, a 6-foot rod to a 7-foot rod. If you're buying for your kid, your grandkid, whatever it may be, get them something that they can hold comfortably, because obviously a 7-foot rod for a 3 or 4-year-old is probably not even going to go, it's not going to go over that well, because they probably won't be able to hold it without you helping them. Get them something they can comfortably hold. Power, again, this doesn't really matter too much unless you're fishing stock trout, in which case I would say go to a lighter action power or something like that. But for your general all-purpose fishing, get something in a medium power. Action, fast, again, this doesn't really matter as a beginner. I do recommend buying rod and reel combos as you are a beginner. Generally, I say spend at least $80, because then you figure $40 got put into the reel, $40 got put into the rod. Just as a general combo buying guideline. However, the Ugly Stick GX2 rod reel combo, I believe currently at time of this video, is $60. The rod is $50, the reel's $10. So the reel, you'll probably only get a year out of the reel. But if you're a beginner, or it's after about a year of fishing, you should know if you're going to like it and want to do it more. You'll probably at that point, after you've used that for a while, you might even want to upgrade at that point. Or if you're the casual weekender, that you're obviously get longer than a year out of that reel. But it's honestly a perfect combo, perfect rod, perfect reel setup for anyone who's just getting into fishing. It's inexpensive. The stick itself is, I've never seen anyone break them, never heard of anyone breaking them that didn't drop a car door on it. So the durability is perfect, and it's great to learn how to take care of your rod and your equipment properly, because there is a lot of abuse that those Ugly Stick rods can take. So that would be my suggestion for you guys for your beginner rods, is to go with that if you're going to get anything like that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so that's going to wrap up the video. So again, this was obviously just a very general rod reel suggestions, and I gave you a couple tactics and stuff like that that you could try out yourself around here. If there's anything you guys need elaboration on, or if there's anything like that you have that you're wondering if it's good for, you can pop them down in the comments, and I'll get back to you, and I can give you a little bit more information, because obviously this is a very... I could talk probably 2 or 3 hours about what goes into a rod, the cost, what you should buy, and all that stuff. But I don't want you... Number one, no one's going to sit for a 2-hour video like that. And I don't want to talk for 2 hours like that, because I feel like that would just be boring to listen to. So yeah, again, if you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section. Appreciate you guys watching, if you stuck to the end. And I will see you in the next one. Have a good one.